The alien marketplace was alive with color and sound. Stalls filled with glowing fruits, metal trinkets, and strange machines that hummed softly. Voices of merchants rose in the air, calling customers from every corner. A human, tall and scarred from old battles, walked slowly through the crowd. His name was Daniel. He was only there to trade for supplies, nothing more. But fate had other plans. Near one stall stood a little alien girl, no more than 10 years old in human years. Her skin shimmered like silver under the sun, and her big, violet eyes looked around with innocent wonder. She held a small basket, too heavy for her small arms, yet she refused to drop it. She was alone, though she kept glancing around as if searching for her mother. Daniel noticed her, but only for a moment. He kept walking, pulling his cloak tighter. He was an outsider here, and the stares of the aliens told him he was not welcome. Still, the girl's face stayed in the corner of his mind, so small, so fragile in a place that felt dangerous. Then it happened. A sharp whistle cut the air. Too sharp, too sudden, like the sound of metal tearing. Daniel's instincts screamed. He had heard that sound before on battlefields just before death arrived. His body moved before his mind could think. The explosion ripped through the center of the marketplace. A ball of fire swallowed the stalls, wood and stone flying in every direction. People screamed, running, falling, crashing into each other, in panic. Shrapnel, jagged black metal, spun like deadly knives through the smoke. Daniel's eyes locked on the little girl. She was frozen, staring at the fire, her mouth open in silent terror. Around her, others ran, leaving her behind. A large piece of burning wood was falling toward her, and shards of metal whirled in her direction. Daniel didn't hesitate. He sprinted. His boots hit the dirt hard as he pushed through the wave of panicked aliens. His chest burned, his lungs screamed, but his mind was only on the girl. "Move," he shouted, though none understood his language. In the last second, he reached her. He threw himself forward, grabbing the girl and pulling her to the ground. His body curled over hers like a shield. The shrapnel struck. Sharp metal tore into his back, his shoulders, his arms. The pain was blinding, hot and sharp. Blood filled his mouth as he gritted his teeth, holding tighter around the child. Another blast shook the ground, lifting dust into the air. Daniel pressed the girl's head against his chest, whispering without thought, "You're safe. Stay down." She trembled under him, her small hands gripping his shirt. Her voice was a broken cry, strange words he could not understand. But he knew fear when he heard it. He knew helplessness too well. More shrapnel rained down, cutting into his flesh. Each strike sent waves of pain through him, but he did not move. He had been a soldier once. He had known pain before. He would take it all again if it meant the girl would live. Seconds felt like hours. The screams around them turned distant. The fire roared. Dust and smoke filled the air, choking every breath. Daniel's vision blurred. He tried to lift his head but felt his strength slipping. Finally, the blast stopped. Silence fell, heavy and broken only by crackling flames. The girl stirred under him. Slowly, she raised her head. Her wide violet eyes stared at his face, shining with tears. She whispered something again, her voice shaking. Her tiny hand touched his blood-soaked shoulder. Daniel tried to smile, though his lips trembled. "It's all right," he said softly, knowing she could not understand his words. His body was failing. The wounds were too deep, the blood too much. His head grew heavy. Yet he forced himself to stay above her, to keep her safe until help arrived, or until he no longer could. Through the smoke, shadowy figures appeared. Alien guards in shining armor rushed forward, weapons drawn. One pointed toward Daniel, shouting. Another reached for the girl. Daniel's body gave out. He collapsed to the side, the world spinning into darkness. His last sight before losing consciousness was the girl clutching his hand tightly, refusing to let go, even as the guards pulled her away. Darkness swallowed him, but even in that final fading moment, one thought burned in his mind. She's safe. That's enough. What he did not know was that this single act, throwing himself into the blast, taking the shrapnel into his own body, would change everything. When he woke again, the world around him would be different, and the aliens would no longer see him as just an outsider. The blast was only the beginning. Daniel's first breath was not his own. It felt forced, heavy, as if air was being pushed into his lungs. His eyes opened to a strange glow above him. The ceiling was not made of stone or metal, he knew. It shimmered, alive, pulsing softly with colors that shifted like liquid light. For a moment he thought he was dead. Maybe this was the afterlife. But then the pain came back. His body burned. Every wound screamed at once. He tried to move, but something held him down. Bands of light wrapped around his arms and chest, holding him still, humming softly as they pulsed. He gasped, panic rising. Shadows moved near him. Figures with long faces, ridged skin, and glowing eyes leaned over. Their hands moved quickly, tracing signs in the air. Strange tools hummed. He caught the smell of burning metal and something sweet like flowers. One of them pressed a glowing rod against his shoulder. Heat surged, and his body jolted. He cried out, but his voice was weak, broken. Then he heard it. Her voice. The little, alien girl. She was there, standing just beside him. Her small hands gripped the edge of the glowing bed. Her silver skin reflected the strange light, and her violet eyes were red from crying. She was whispering fast, her words sharp, desperate. He didn't understand her language, but he knew what she was saying. Don't let him die. The aliens around him slowed. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped closer. His face was stern, his eyes glowing brighter. He spoke to the girl in a deep voice. She shouted back, stamping her foot, pointing at Daniel. Daniel blinked, his mind hazy. His hand twitched, reaching weakly toward her. She grabbed it instantly, holding on tight. Still. Here, he whispered, though she could not know his words. The taller alien frowned but said something sharp. The others obeyed, adjusting the glowing bands around Daniel's body. The light changed color, sinking deeper into his skin. He felt a strange warmth spread through him, numbing the pain. Slowly, the fire in his wounds softened, though weakness still pulled at him. Time blurred. He drifted in and out of darkness. He saw the girl beside him every time he opened his eyes. Sometimes she was crying, sometimes whispering to him. Other times, guards in shining armor stood behind her, watching him with hard eyes. When he finally woke fully, he was no longer on the glowing bed. He lay on a soft surface inside a circular chamber. The walls shone faintly as if alive. He struggled to sit up, his body stiff. His chest ached, but the bleeding had stopped. Strange scars marked his arms, where the shrapnel had cut deep. The girl sat beside him, holding a small bowl of glowing liquid. When she saw him stir, her face lit up with relief. She pressed the bowl toward him, saying something quickly. Daniel frowned, then slowly reached for it. The liquid smelled strange, but his throat burned with thirst. He drank, wincing at the taste, bitter, metallic, but it warmed his body. Before he could speak, the door to the chamber slid open. 2 armored guards entered, their weapons strapped to their sides. Behind them walked 3 elders. Their robes shimmered like liquid silver, and their eyes glowed brighter than the rest. The girl jumped to her feet, blocking their path to Daniel. She spread her arms wide and shouted something at them. Her small voice shook with anger, but it was fierce, protective. The elders spoke among themselves, their voices calm but sharp. One pointed at Daniel. Another shook his head. The third glanced at the girl, then sighed. Daniel's heart pounded. He could not understand the words, but he understood the weight. They were deciding something about him. He tried to stand, but his legs failed. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to sit straighter. His voice was weak, but he spoke anyway, hoping his tone carried meaning. "I'm not your enemy," he said, slowly, firmly. The elders turned their glowing eyes toward him. They didn't answer. The girl shouted again, pointing at her chest, then at Daniel. Her small fists clenched. Tears filled her eyes. but she stood her ground. One elder finally stepped closer. He looked down at Daniel for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he said a single word, low, commanding. The guards moved forward. Daniel tensed, his hands curling into fists, though he had no strength left to fight. Were they here to thank him, or to take him away? The girl screamed and grabbed his arm, clinging tight as the guards approached. Daniel's mind raced. He didn't know their laws. He didn't know what saving her life meant in their culture. All he knew was this. He had taken the blast for her, and now his own fate rested in the hands of strangers who might see him as a hero or as a dangerous outsider. As the guards pulled him to his feet, pain shot through his body. His vision blurred again, but before darkness claimed him once more, he heard the girl's cry echo through the chamber, her voice breaking but strong. She would not let them take him without a fight, and in that moment, Daniel realized, whatever happened. Next, he was no longer just himself. His life was tied to hers now. Daniel's footsteps echoed as the guards dragged him through the long, glowing corridors. His body was weak, each movement sending sharp pain through his healing wounds. Still, he kept his head up. He would not let them see him break. The little, alien girl followed close behind, her small feet running to keep up with the armored guards. She shouted in her own language, her voice angry, but the guards ignored her. Daniel looked over his shoulder once and saw her determined face. Despite her size, she looked like a warrior fighting for him. They entered a massive chamber. The air felt heavy, filled with strange energy that made his skin prickle. The ceiling arched high, glowing softly, and at the center stood a raised platform. Upon it sat the alien elders. 3 of them, cloaked in robes of silver and blue, their glowing eyes fixed on Daniel. The guards pushed him forward until he knelt at the base of the platform. The girl rushed to his side, holding his arm as if to keep him steady. The eldest elder stood, tall and commanding. His voice boomed through the chamber, low and sharp. Daniel couldn't understand the words, but he understood the weight. They were judging him. The girl cried out, her voice breaking. She pointed at her chest, then at Daniel, then pressed her small hands together as if begging. The elders whispered among themselves. Their glowing eyes turned cold. Daniel clenched his fists. He hated being powerless, hated not knowing their words. But he could read their faces. Some of the elders saw him as dangerous, others looked uncertain. Finally, one elder stepped forward, pointing at Daniel's chest where fresh scars lined his skin. His voice was sharp, accusing. He gestured toward the guards, then made a slicing motion across his throat. Daniel's stomach twisted. He didn't need translation to know what that meant. Some of them wanted him dead. The girl screamed. She threw herself in front of Daniel, spreading her arms wide as if to shield him from the elder's judgment. Her violet eyes glistened with tears, but her voice was strong, louder than before. She shouted word after word, stamping her foot, refusing to move. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The elders stared at her, surprised by her defiance. Then one of them sighed, rubbing his forehead. He spoke softly to the others. Daniel's heart pounded. He forced himself to rise, though pain shot through his legs. He stood beside the girl, his voice low but firm. "I don't know your laws," he said, breathing hard. "But I do know this. I saved her life. I bled for her. If that makes me your enemy, then finish it now. But if that means something to you, then stop treating me like a criminal." The words fell into the chamber like heavy stones. He knew they didn't understand the language, but maybe his tone, his eyes, his stance would carry meaning. The girl tugged at his sleeve, nodding furiously, then turned back to the elders and repeated his gesture, pointing at her chest, then at him. She shouted again, her voice shaking but determined. The elders murmured among themselves. One shook his head, another nodded slowly. Finally, the eldest elder raised his hand, silencing the room. He spoke a single word. The guards stepped back. The girl gasped with relief. She threw her arms around Daniel's waist, clinging to him tightly. Daniel exhaled, his body shaking. He wasn't safe. Not yet. But at least they hadn't ended him. The eldest elder leaned forward, his glowing eyes fixed on Daniel. He spoke slowly this time, as if testing each word. Though Daniel couldn't understand, the elder's gaze told him, "Your life is not yours anymore." Daniel frowned, unease twisting inside him. Was this their way of sparing him, or binding him to something deeper? The girl pulled back just enough to look up at him. She whispered softly, her voice trembling, but her eyes were hopeful. Daniel didn't understand her words, but he felt their meaning. She didn't want him to leave. The guards motioned for him to follow. This time their touch was firm but not cruel. They led him away from the platform, back into the glowing corridors. The girl followed again, never letting go of his hand. Daniel's mind raced. He had faced battles before, but this was different. Guns and bombs he understood, but alien councils, strange traditions, and judgments in languages he couldn't speak. This was a battlefield where he was blind. Yet one thing was clear. The girl had tied her fate to his. She had stood against her own elders for him. Whatever bond her people believed in, it had already begun. As they returned to his chamber, the guards left him inside with the girl. She sat beside him, her small hand in his. The silence between them was filled with meaning neither could put into words. Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes. His wound still ached, but something else weighed heavier, the knowledge that his future was no longer his own. In the silence, he whispered to himself, "This isn't over. It's just the beginning." The girl squeezed his hand tighter as if she understood. Outside the chamber, the elders' voices carried down the corridor, low and tense. Their decision had spared him for now, but it was not mercy. It was something else, a binding he could not yet see, and Daniel knew, deep down, that the judgment was far from finished. Night came quietly inside the alien stronghold. The glowing walls dimmed to a soft silver, and the hum of strange machines slowed until the air felt almost still. Daniel lay awake on the soft bed provided for him. His body still ached, though the alien healing light had closed most of his wounds. The scars were fresh reminders of the blast, each throb of pain whispering that he should have died. Sleep refused to come. He was in a strange place, surrounded by beings who did not trust him. The memory of the elder's judgment burned in his flesh. They had spared him, but not freely. He could feel it. They had bound him to something he did not yet understand. A soft sound broke the silence. The door slid open with a faint hiss. Daniel tensed, ready for guards. But instead, it was her. The little alien girl stepped into the room, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She looked around nervously before shutting the door. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the dim light, and her violet eyes seemed brighter than ever. Daniel pushed himself up slowly. "What are you doing here?" he whispered. Though he knew she couldn't understand him, she walked forward with quiet steps, holding out the bundle. Inside were pieces of food, strange fruits that glowed faintly and bread that shimmered as if sprinkled with starlight. She placed it in his lap, then sat down beside him, watching carefully as if waiting for him to eat. Daniel looked at her, then at the food. His chest tightened. She had snuck into his room just to bring this. Slowly he picked up a piece and bit into it. The taste was strange, sweet, and sharp at once, but it filled his stomach with warmth. The girl smiled, her shoulders relaxing. She said something softly, her words musical but unknown to him. Still, Daniel could guess what she meant. Eat. Be strong. When he finished, she pointed at his scars. Her small hand hovered over his shoulder, not touching, but close enough that he felt her warmth. Then she pressed her hand to her own chest and spoke again, firmer this time. Daniel frowned, trying to piece her meaning together. She pointed to him, then to herself, then pressed her hands together tightly. It clicked. "You're saying we're connected?" Daniel asked slowly. She nodded, her eyes shining. She repeated the gesture again, him, her, hands together. Then, she touched the scars on his chest and whispered something like a promise. Daniel leaned back, his heart heavy. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood enough. In her people's tradition, maybe saving her life meant more than gratitude. Maybe it meant a bond, something sacred. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his face. "I didn't save you to own you, kid," he muttered, his voice low. "I just couldn't stand by." She tilted her head, not understanding his words but reading his tone. Then she smiled again, soft and small, and leaned against his arm as if she trusted him completely. Daniel froze. He had fought in wars. He had seen comrades die, seen betrayal, seen cruelty. Trust was rare, fragile. Yet here was this small alien child, placing her faith in him without hesitation. The door slid open again and Daniel stiffened. 2 guards stood there, their glowing armor reflecting the dim light. They stepped forward, speaking sharply in their language. One pointed at the girl. Her smile vanished. She shook her head violently, clinging to Daniel's arm. She shouted back at the guards, her voice cracking but strong. Daniel's protective instinct flared. He pulled her closer, glaring at the guards though he was weak. "She's staying," he growled, his tone low and threatening. The guards paused. They couldn't understand his words, but they felt the weight behind them. For a moment, tension filled the room. Then one of them muttered something to the other and they stepped back, leaving the door half open as they retreated. The girl relaxed, but her small body still shook. She whispered something softly, then buried her face against his side. Daniel exhaled, wrapping his arm around her carefully. "Looks like we're in this together," he murmured. Hours passed in silence. She eventually fell asleep against him, her breathing soft and steady. Daniel stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. The reality sank deeper into him. This wasn't just about saving her life anymore. By their law, by their tradition, he was bound to her. Maybe as family, maybe as protector. He didn't know the exact meaning, but he could feel the weight of it. And despite the danger, despite the strangeness of it all, he didn't feel regret. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something he thought he had lost forever. A purpose. As the first light of morning crept into the chamber, the girl stirred, still clinging to him. Daniel sat quietly, staring at the door where the guards had stood. He knew this bond would not be simple. The elders would test him, challenge him, maybe even try to break him. But he had already decided, no matter what came next, he would not abandon her. The bond was real, and he would honor it, even if it cost him everything. The following days passed in uneasy peace. Daniel's wounds healed slowly under the glowing touch of alien medicine, and the little girl, whom he now knew was called Lyra, never left his side. Wherever he went, she followed, clutching his hand or walking close enough to catch his shadow. Guards still watched him from a distance, their eyes sharp, their hands near their weapons. But none dared to separate the two. Daniel had begun to notice things. Whispers in the halls, nervous glances from the aliens, extra guards patrolling the outer walls at night. Something was coming and the elders feared it. One evening, as the silver sky darkened, the ground trembled. At first, Daniel thought it was another small quake, but then came the sound, low, rumbling, like thunder rolling closer. Lyra's eyes widened with fear. She pulled at his arm, whispering a word again and again. Raiders. The memory of the explosion in the marketplace hit him like ice. These were the same people, the ones who had planted the bomb. They had returned to finish what they started. Alarms blared through the stronghold, sharp tones that echoed down every corridor. Guards rushed past with weapons drawn, their armor glowing brighter as if awakened by danger. Daniel tried to follow, but one guard pushed him back. "Stay!" the guard barked, pointing at the floor. Though Daniel didn't understand every word, the meaning was clear. He was still seen as an outsider, not trusted to fight beside them. Lyra, however, gripped his hand tightly and shook her head. She whispered something fierce, her voice trembling with both fear and defiance. Daniel knelt, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Listen," he said firmly, though she couldn't understand the words. "You stay safe. I'll handle this." But Lyra only shook her head harder, her violet eyes shining with tears. She pointed to his scars, then to herself, then pressed her hands together. The bond. She was reminding him that they were tied, that they couldn't be separated, not even now. Before Daniel could respond, the wall shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. A loud crash echoed, and the chamber door burst open. Smoke and fire rolled in. The raiders had breached the stronghold. Figures rushed into the hall. Dark shapes in jagged armor carrying weapons that hissed with energy. Their eyes glowed with a cruel light. Without hesitation, they struck at the first guards they saw, blades and blasts cutting through the air. Daniel grabbed Lyra and pulled her behind him. He had no weapon, only his fists, but he would not let them take her. One raider spotted him. With a twisted grin, the alien charged, raising a blade. Daniel's instincts returned. The soldier inside him woke. He sidestepped, caught the raider's arm, and drove his fist into the creature's throat. The alien stumbled back, gasping, before Daniel slammed his head into the wall. Another came, weapon raised. Daniel grabbed the fallen blade and blocked. The strike, sparks flying. His muscles screamed with pain, his wounds not yet fully healed, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He slashed once, then twice, and the raider fell. Lyra cried out, pointing. More were coming. A group of 3 raiders advanced down the corridor, their weapons glowing bright. Daniel cursed under his breath. He couldn't take them all head on. He looked around quickly, spotting a narrow side passage. "Move!" he shouted, pulling Lyra with him. They ran, the sound of boots and snarls chasing close behind. Daniel's chest burned, his scars tearing with every step, but he didn't slow. He could hear Lyra's breath beside him, fast and panicked, yet she kept running, trusting him to lead. They turned a corner and nearly collided with more raiders. Daniel's heart sank. Trapped. He shoved Lyra behind him, raising the stolen blade. "Stay back!" he roared, his voice echoing in the alien hall. The raiders laughed, their cruel eyes glowing brighter. But then, from the other side of the corridor, guards arrived. Armored soldiers of Lyra's people charged forward, weapons blazing. Energy blasts lit the hall, striking down the raiders. The survivors fled into the smoke, their cruel laughter fading. Daniel lowered the blade slowly, breathing hard. His body shook with exhaustion. He turned to Lyra. She was safe. Though her face was pale, she threw her arms around him, trembling. The guards stared at Daniel, their glowing eyes uncertain. One of them stepped forward, raising his weapon slightly. For a moment, Daniel thought they might still see him as a threat. But Lyra shouted, clinging to his arm. She pointed at the fallen raiders, then at him, her voice fierce. The guard hesitated, then slowly lowered his weapon. Daniel met the guard's gaze, his own steady. "I'm not your enemy," he said again, even though they couldn't understand. The guard nodded once, almost reluctantly. The battle outside still raged. But for now, the corridor was theirs. Daniel tightened his grip on the blade. He was tired of being told to stay behind, tired of being treated like a prisoner. If the raiders wanted war, then he would fight it, not just for himself, but for her, for Lyra. The enemy had returned, and this time, Daniel would not stand aside. The stronghold smelled of smoke and blood. Fires still burned in the outer halls, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the night. The raiders had been driven back for now, but the damage was done. Broken walls, fallen guards, and fear in every corner. Daniel sat on the steps outside, a chamber, a blood-stained blade resting across his knees. His chest rose and fell heavily, his body aching. He had fought like the soldier he once was, but the weight of it pressed down on him. He had thought he was done with war. He had thought he'd left that life behind, but tonight proved otherwise. Beside him, Lyra leaned against his arm, her small face buried in his torn cloak. She hadn't let go of him once, even when the battle ended. Her trust, so pure and unshaken, made his heart ache in ways no wound could. The elders gathered inside the great chamber. Their voices carried out in sharp, tense tones. They were arguing. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Some spoke of fear, others of anger, and a few of gratitude. His name was spoken again and again, mixed into their debate. At last, the eldest elder stepped outside. His silver robe was torn at the sleeve, his glowing eyes heavy with fatigue. Guards stood behind him, their faces grim. The elder pointed at Daniel, then motioned for him to rise. Daniel stood, holding Lyra's hand tightly. She whispered something quickly, her voice urgent, as if warning him. Inside the chamber, the elders faced him. The air was thick with tension. One elder gestured to him, then to the door that led beyond the stronghold. His hand moved in a wide arc, signaling freedom. Another elder spoke quickly, his voice sharp, pointing at Lyra, then at Daniel's scars. The debate began again. Daniel's stomach twisted. He could see it now. He was being offered a choice. Leave this place, leave their battles, leave Lyra, or stay, bound to her by their sacred law. The eldest elder raised his hand, silencing the others. He looked at Daniel for a long time, then spoke slowly, as if the weight of each word mattered. Daniel didn't know the language, but he knew what the elder meant. You can go. No chains will hold you, but if you stay, you will be one of us and you will fight with us. Lyra gasped, turning to Daniel. Her violet eyes shimmered with fear. She grabbed his arm, shaking her head violently, whispering the word she had said before. Bond. Daniel's chest tightened. The offer of freedom burned inside him. He could walk away, find a ship, disappear into the stars. No more battles, no more blood. Just peace. But then he looked at her. This small, fragile child who had clung to him since the blast, who had stood before the council, who had shouted for him when no one else would. Without him, she would be alone. Without him, she might not survive the next raid. His past whispered in his ear. He had lost comrades before. He had seen children orphaned by war. He had sworn never again to carry such weight. And yet here it was again, placed in his hands. Freedom or responsibility. One elder stepped closer, his eyes glowing brighter. He gestured toward the door again, his tone firm, almost commanding. Leave. Lyra stepped in front of Daniel, blocking the elder's hand. She shouted, her voice breaking, tears rolling down her cheeks. She pressed her hands together, then grabbed Daniel's hand, holding it against her chest. Daniel closed his eyes. His body ached. His mind screamed for rest, but his heart already knew the answer. He bent down, lowering himself to Lyra's level. His voice was soft, trembling. I can't leave you, he whispered, even though she could not understand the words. I won't. Lyra's tears turned to a shaky smile. She nodded quickly, holding his hand tighter. Daniel straightened and faced the elders. His voice was low but steady. I stay. The elders were silent for a moment. Then one sighed. Another shook his head, and the eldest elder simply nodded once. The choice was made. Guards lowered their weapons. The chamber fell into uneasy silence. Daniel was no longer just an outsider. He was part of them now, by their law, by their bond, by his own decision. As he left the chamber with Lyra at his side, Daniel felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He had chosen the harder path. He had chosen loyalty over freedom, and deep inside, he knew what that meant. The next time the raiders came, he would not only fight for survival, he would fight for family. The stronghold no longer felt the same. Where once it had been walls of safety, now it was a place of tension. Smoke from the last raid still clung to the stones, and the air smelled of ash. Families huddled together, whispering in fear. Every eye turned toward the skies, waiting for the enemy to return. Daniel stood at the training yard, gripping a weapon they had given him. It was unlike any blade he had ever held. Light shimmered across its edge, humming faintly with energy. His scars ached with every movement, but he trained anyway. Swing, block, strike. Again and again until sweat rolled down his face. Lyra sat nearby, watching him. She clapped when his strikes hit true, her laughter breaking through the heaviness of the air. Her smile gave him strength even when his body screamed with pain. The guards, once suspicious of him, now trained beside him. They studied his moves carefully, surprised by the human way of fighting. Quick, raw, brutal. Daniel showed them tricks from his old battles, ways to turn an enemy's strength against them. Slowly, their stares of doubt began to fade, but peace did not last. On the fourth night after his choice, alarms echoed again, louder this time. Urgent. From the watchtowers came the cry. The raiders were back, and they had brought more. The ground shook with the thunder of heavy machines. Flames lit the horizon as dark ships descended. The stronghold trembled. Children cried. Elders hurried to gather the people in the inner chambers. Daniel grabbed his blade and looked to Lyra. Her face was pale, but she stood tall. She whispered, his name, or as close as her tongue could shape it. Her small hand touched his scars, reminding him of their bond. I'll come back, Daniel promised softly, though his heart raced. He placed her in the care of the healers, who tried to lead her away, but she refused to let go of his hand until the very last second. Her eyes burned with trust, and it gave him courage. The walls shook again. The raiders stormed through the gates, their jagged armor glinting in the firelight. They poured in with savage cries, weapons blazing. Daniel charged into the battle. He fought like a storm. His blade hummed with every strike, cutting through the enemy with a mix of alien power and human skill. He moved fast, dodging, countering, striking. His scars bled again, but he did not stop. The guards followed his lead, inspired by his fearlessness. The raiders snarled, but for every guard that fell, Daniel struck 2 of them down. He fought not for glory, not for himself, but for Lyra, for the bond that had given him purpose again. At the height of battle, a massive raider leader appeared, taller than the rest, armored in black steel, carrying a weapon that burned with crimson fire. The ground shook with each step he took. He pointed at Daniel and roared a challenge. Daniel's breath was ragged, but he raised his blade. He could not turn away. If this leader broke through, Lyra and the others would die. The clash was brutal. Sparks flew as their weapons collided. Each strike shook Daniel's bones, but he held on. He remembered every lesson from old wars, every trick of survival. He fought with everything he had left. The raider leader swung hard, knocking Daniel to his knees. Pain shot through his body. For a moment, the enemy raised his weapon for the final strike. Then a small cry echoed through the battlefield. Daniel! Lyra. She had slipped past the healers. She stood at the edge of the fight, her small hands clenched, her violet eyes glowing with fierce courage. The leader turned his head for just a moment. That was enough. Daniel surged forward with a roar, driving his blade through the raider's chest. Energy exploded outward, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. So, leader fell with a thunderous crash. Silence followed. The raiders, seeing their champion fall, broke into panic. They turned and fled back toward their ships. Guards cheered, raising their weapons high. The stronghold had survived. Daniel staggered, nearly falling, but Lyra ran to him. She threw her arms around his waist, tears streaming down her face. He dropped his blade and wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. The elders approached, their glowing eyes no longer cold. They bowed their heads, one by one. For the first time, they showed respect, not just to the man who had fought, but to the protector who had chosen their people as his own. Daniel looked down at Lyra, who clung to him like the world depended on it. His chest ached, his body broken, but his heart was steady. He had found something more powerful than war, more powerful than pain, a bond, a family, a reason. He was no longer just a human outsider. He was their protector, and nothing in the stars would ever take that away.